Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're embarking on a journey back in time to an era of majestic sailing ships, exotic spices, and colossal ambition. We're diving deep into the story of a company that started in a modest London office, but grew to rule a subcontinent. This is the incredible and often controversial story of the East India Company. Our story begins on the very last day of the year 1600. While Londoners were celebrating the turn of the century, Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to a group of merchants calling themselves the Company of Merchants of London, trading into the East Indies. Their goal was simple: to get a piece of the lucrative spice trade, which was dominated by the Dutch and Portuguese. Little did they know, this charter was the seed from which an empire would grow. For the first century and a half, the company was primarily what its name suggested, a trading firm. Its ships, known as East Indiamen, braved treacherous seas to bring back pepper, cloves, cinnamon, and later textiles like calico and silk, and tea from China. These goods were wildly popular in Europe, and the company's shareholders grew incredibly wealthy. They established small trading posts, called factories, in coastal cities like Surat, Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. At this point, they were guests in a powerful and sophisticated Mughal empire, needing permission from local rulers to trade. They were merchants, not conquerors, but things began to change in the mid-18th century. The Mughal Empire, which had once been a formidable centralized power, was weakening and fragmenting. Local princes and nawabs began asserting their independence, creating a power vacuum. At the same time, the East India Company's main European rival, the French East India Company, was also trying to expand its influence in India. This rivalry between Britain and France, which was playing out across the globe in the 7 Years' War, spilled over onto Indian soil. This is where the story shifts dramatically from commerce to conquest. And the key figure in this transformation is Robert Clive. Clive was an ambitious and audacious company clerk who rose to become a brilliant military strategist. The turning point was the Battle of Plassey in 1757. On paper, it should have been an easy victory for the Nawab, but Clive was not just a soldier. He was a master of political intrigue. He secretly conspired with one of the Nawab's key commanders, Mir Jafar, promising to make him the new Nawab in exchange for his betrayal. When the battle commenced, Mir Jafar and his forces stood idle, refusing to fight for Siraj-ud-Dowlah. The Nawab's army, despite its size, fell into chaos and was swiftly defeated. Clive had won Bengal, the richest province in India, not just through military might, but through deception. The victory at Plassey was a game changer. The company was no longer just a group of traders. It was now a political power, a kingmaker. It was granted the right to collect taxes in Bengal, which provided a massive and steady stream of revenue. This money was used to fund a larger and more professional private army, an army that would become larger than the official British Army itself. With this financial and military power, the company began a relentless expansion across India. They used a combination of tactics. Sometimes it was outright war. The Anglo-Mysore Wars against Hyder Ali and his son, Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore, were brutal and hard-fought. The Anglo-Maratha Wars saw the company defeat a powerful confederacy that had dominated central and western India. But just as often, they used diplomacy and legal maneuvering. One of their most effective tools was the doctrine of lapse. This policy, most famously enforced by Governor-General Lord Dalhousie, stated that if an Indian ruler died without a direct male heir, his kingdom would be annexed by the company. This was a direct violation of long-standing Indian tradition, where rulers could adopt an heir. Using this doctrine, the company absorbed several states, fueling widespread resentment. Another tactic was the subsidiary alliance. A state would be forced to sign a treaty, agreeing to host company troops for protection and pay for their upkeep. This effectively stripped the ruler of their sovereignty and made them a puppet of the company. So, how could a private company do all this? How could a board of directors in London command armies and rule over millions of people thousands of miles away? The truth is, the line between the company and the British state was incredibly blurry. The British government profited immensely from the company's success. Many members of Parliament were company shareholders. The government provided naval and military support when needed, and in return, the company's wealth flowed back into Britain, funding its industrial revolution and global ambitions. The company was, for all intents and purposes, an arm of the British state, a privatized tool for colonial expansion. But this rule was not without consequences for the people of India. The company's primary motive was profit, and this often came at a terrible human cost. Heavy taxation crippled local economies and drove farmers into poverty. The infamous Bengal famine of 1770, which claimed millions of lives, was made far worse by the company's brutal tax collection policies and its hoarding of grain. Indian industries, particularly the world-renowned textile industry, were systematically dismantled to eliminate competition for British-manufactured goods. India, once a global manufacturing powerhouse, was deindustrialized and turned into a supplier of raw materials for British factories. The growing resentment and anger against company rule finally exploded in 1857 with the Indian Rebellion, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny. It began with Indian soldiers, the Sepoys, in the company's army, but it quickly spread, drawing in princes, landlords, and peasants who had all suffered under company rule. The rebellion was vast, violent, and shook the foundations of British power in India. Although it was eventually crushed with extreme brutality, it marked the beginning of the end for the East India Company. The British government, shocked by the scale of the uprising, decided that a private company could no longer be trusted to govern a vast territory like India. In 1858, the Government of India Act was passed. The East India Company's territories, armies, and administrative functions were all transferred directly to the British Crown. Queen Victoria was declared Empress of India. The era of the British Raj had officially begun, and the company that had built an empire was dissolved, its legacy absorbed into the larger story of British imperialism. The East India Company officially ceased to exist in 1874, a quiet end for an entity that had once been so powerful. Its story serves as a powerful reminder of how a pursuit of commercial profit can morph into territorial conquest and political domination. It's a complex legacy of trade and treachery, of innovation and exploitation, a story that fundamentally reshaped both Britain and India and whose consequences are still felt to this day. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical deep dive. What part of the East India Company's story do you find most fascinating or shocking? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into the past. We'll see you in the next one.